Section 8 of the Golden Porch. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Lady Bird D. The Golden Porch by W.M.L. Hutchinson. The Prince Who Was a Seer. Chapter 2. Years came and went, and still all was well with the princes and the folk of Argos. Adrastus soon learned that Amphiaraus was a seer, and that whatever he foretold most surely came to pass, and he took his counsel in all things, so that the people marvelled because the king now ruled them mildly and justly. And the land had peace, for no enemy could plot anything against Adrastus that the birds did not bring warning of to Amphiaraus. Meanwhile, children were born both to Eurydice and to the wife whom the king had taken in Sicyon. Now when the daughters of the king were maidens grown, he was troubled by a strange dream concerning them, and told it to Amphiaraus. I dreamed, he said, that a lion and a bear came to Argos and were married to my daughters. What means this? Tomorrow at this time, answered the seer, go out of the north gate of the city, and you will see that lion and that bear. Bring them to your palace and marry them to your daughters, for the gods will have it so. Adrastus went out of the city gate on the morrow, and saw two young men coming towards him, richly armed, after the fashion of kings' sons, and each had a painted shield. Now the shield of one was emblazoned with the figure of a lion, and that of the other with the figure of a bear. The king saluted them, and asked them who they were and whence they came. I am called Tydeus, answered he with the lion shield. I have fled from the house of my father, who is king in the far north country, because I have slain a kinsman by mischance. Then he whose device was the bear said, Polynices is my name, and I come from the city of Thebes. The curse of blood is come upon the king my father, and he is an outcast from the land. Now my brother and I agreed together to rule in Thebes by turns, each for a year. But when the first year was over, my brother would not give up the kingdom, and he has driven me forth, a banished man. So Adrastus knew that these princes were sent to him by the gods, to become his sons-in-law according to his dream. And he bade them welcome and lodged them in the palace, and having persuaded them to abide in Argos, he gave them his daughters in marriage. But the king's son of Thebes could not rest for the hatred he had to his brother, and he thought day and night upon revenge. Ere long he began to work upon Adrastus with promises and entreaties to gather a host together and make war on Thebes, telling him what great and goodly spoils should be his share when the city was taken. The king was easily moved by the hope of gain to undertake such a war. He called his kinsmen and his captains together and declared his mind to them. Now the rest were willing enough to follow him forth to battle, but they waited to hear what counsel Amphiaraus would give. Then slowly uprose the seer, and spoke a warning in solemn tones. Fight not in this young man's quarrel, Adrastus, lest you bring on us and on our children the curse that rests upon his house. For 3 generations the wrath of gods has not ceased from the royal race of Thebes, nor will it pass from them till Polynices perish by the sword, and his brother also. Hear now the tale of how it came. Laius the king, for a wickedness that he did in secret, was hated of the heavenly ones, and they laid this doom on him, that his own son should slay him, and pronounced it by the mouth of the priestess in the holy place of Delphi. Therefore Laius, when his first child was born, had him cast out upon a wild and barren mountain, there to die or to be devoured by beasts of prey. But the herdsmen of a neighbor king found the babe, and brought him to their lord's wife, who had no children, and she reared him as her son. It fell on a day, when he was grown a man, that he drove in a chariot over a saddle of the hills, and there met him another chariot and a troop of slaves running on foot. Now the two chariots could not pass in the narrow road, and the servants of the men in the chariot cried roughly to the son of Laius to make way, and seized his horses' bridles to turn them off the road onto the hillside. And he, in anger, urged his horses forward till he was close to the other charioteer, who leaned forward and struck him in the face with his whip. At that, the son of Laius drew his sword and stabbed that stranger to the heart, and he fell down dead in the chariot. The youth had but one servant with him, and the slaves were many, but they scattered in terror when they saw their lord was slain, and he dragged the dead man's chariot aside and went his way, not knowing the thing that he had done. For that man was Laius the king. After this, the land of Thebes was ravaged by a strange and cruel monster who preyed on youths and maidens, till the dead king's kinsmen let proclaim everywhere that whoever should slay the monster should take the kingdom for his reward. Many bards have sung, and often have we heard in Argos, how a stranger youth made an end of that fell creature which men called the Sphinx, and became king in Thebes. That tale were too long to tell. But the blood he had shed in wrath was avenged at last upon that stranger youth, for he was the son of Laius. And after many years, a chance revealed to him the name of his true father, and who it was he slew on the mountain road. Then it was that in agony of soul he made known the truth to his sons, to this Polynices and his brother, and bade them take the kingdom that he might go on a pilgrimage to holy places, seeking to wash away his guilt. Ah, hard-hearted prince! Little pity did you and your brother show to your aged father in his evil hour. You it was, his own children, who drove him from the land, a feeble, blind old man, to beg his bread among strangers, and on you, when you thrust him forth, did he call down a father's curse. Beware, I said, Adrastus, how you draw the sword for Polynices. Too surely, when he marches against Thebes, will he march to the doom prepared. When Amphiaraus had thus spoken, he went out from among them. Polynices trembled at the words of the seer, for they brought to his mind the prayer his father uttered at his going forth from the gate of Thebes. O sun, O earth, behold the wrongs I suffer from these my children. Hear, Zeus on high, hear, gods of the underworld, the prayer of Oedipus the outcast, who once was Oedipus the king. As these sons of mine have thrust me out unpitied in mine age, so let them fall unpitied in their youth. As they have hated me for a crime that I did unwittingly, so may they hate each other, till their hate leads them to a crime that they shall do with open eyes. Yet his heart was so bent upon revenge that no warning could turn him from his purpose. He was ready to brave destruction, if only he might destroy the Deucalion his brother before it overwhelmed him. Therefore he pleaded earnestly with Adrastus, and his pleading prevailed against the warning of Amphiaraus, for the king said, Be the rest as it may, Polynices has had much wrong from his brother, and I am minded to help him to his right. Then Tydeus, his other son-in-law, who was a mighty warrior, said, I too am fain to do battle for him, and there are many princes and chiefs, our neighbors, who will gladly march with us to Thebes, to win themselves renown of valor. But some means must be found to make Amphiaraus one of us, for his name is great in all the land, both as a warrior and a prophet, and neither princes nor people will fight with good hope unless he go with our host." "Leave that to me," said Adrastus, "for I know a way to turn him to what I will." And he broke up their council and sent word to Euryphile that he desired speech with her. Now Euryphile had lived so long with Amphiaraus that his tender goodness had brought love out of that selfish heart of hers, as the gentle rain brings flowers out of a parched garden soil. So when she came to her brother, and he told her that the time was come for her to decide a matter between him and her husband, according to the marriage compact, she said to him, "You are very dear to me, my brother, but my lord and husband is dearer still. What seems good to him, I also will uphold, though I am loth to gainsay you." And she went back to her house without more words spoken, and told Amphiaraus what had passed. The seer pressed her hand in silence, and she said, "Do you know, my lord, what this matter is, that Adrastus would have had me take his part in, and so have compelled your consent?" Then he told the king's desire to war with Thebes, and said with a sigh, "I should have known that Adrastus would not heed my warning when there is hope of golden spoils to be won. But I little thought he would seek this way to force me to fight in his host. That is what he meant you to do, my wife, to bid me march with him to Thebes, and by my marriage oath I am bound to yield to his will whenever you shall so decide. Now, I will tell you a thing that I told not to Adrastus, for little would it have hindered his going. I, if I go to Thebes, shall return no more, but meet my doom there." Ill-pleased was King Adrastus that his sister would not so much as hear the thing he desired her help in against Amphiaraus, and he railed upon her to Polynices, saying, "Who shall read a woman? This sister of mine that once loved nothing but gold and jewels, as well becomes a king's daughter, prates to me now of love for the man whom she took for her lord only that she might come back to Argos and make him a tool in my hands. For Amphiaraus and I took an oath together to abide by her judgment when we came to Variance, and now if she would say the word, he must come with us to Thebes, whether he will or no." "Do you tell me that?" said Polynices. "Then let me deal with your sister." Now he said to himself that as he had won the brother with a bribe of wealth, so he would win the sister. Now he knew that she loved jewels, for he had brought with him to Argos a rarer treasure than could be found in the caskets of all the queens on earth. It was a necklace of strange device and cunning workmanship, from a narrow band of beaten gold, 2 rows of pendants hung by chains of pearls, and in the upper row each pendant was a golden dove with outspread wings and ruby eyes, but in the lower each pendant was a golden hand, clasping an apple, and every apple was a topaz or an emerald. This long ago was a marriage gift of the goddess Aphrodite to her fair child Harmonia, whom the gods gave for bride for the first king of Thebes, and all the queens of his house had worn it, till the mother of Polynices bestowed it on her favourite son. With this, he thought, he could tempt Euryphile to betray her husband, however much she loved him. And he was right. The princess at first refused to listen, when his wife, her kinswoman, brought her his message and showed her the wondrous necklace. But he sent again and again, till at last desire of the precious thing so consumed Euryphile that she took it, with promise to give her voice for war with Thebes. Then Polynices hastened to the king, and once more the princes of the land were summoned to council. Adrastus said that he was resolved to march at once upon the city, and when Amphiaraus told him sadly, "This once I cannot go with you to battle," he answered, "That shall Eurydice decide, even as you and I made compact long ago. Let her be called and give judgment between us." Pale as death, with downcast eyes, the traitress came into the hall. Her brother, in few words, told her why she was sent for, and asked, "How say you, my sister, shall Amphiaraus go with me to Thebes, or shall he forbear?" And with eyes still fixed upon the ground, she said in a low voice, "He shall go with you." Then she turned quickly and went out of that assemblage with the handmaids who followed her. "You have heard, Amphiaraus," said the king with a smile of triumph, "and you know now that to Thebes you must go." "I have heard my doom," said the seer, "and not mine only. For I say to you, princes of Argos, that of 7 champions who will lead our host against yonder city, not one shall return alive, save one, and he in flight from a lost battle." So saying, he went also to his house. Before many days, a gallant army set forth at break of day from the gate of Argos, in 7 companies, headed by as many princes in panoply of war. Each chief but one had some device blazoned on his shield which he had chosen to express his purpose and his hopes in going forth. First came the brave Tydeus, whose shield, the color of the midnight sky, was thick sawn with silver stars, with the full-orbed moon in the midst, for he said, "As many stars as shine around this moon, so many souls will I send to throng the place of Death's queen, who is the moon of the netherworld." Next came Capaneus, of that former royal house of Argos, whose last king fell by the wrath of Hera. His emblem was a naked man with a blazing torch, and over him written, "I will fire the city." The third and the fourth leaders were warlike princes, neighbors to Adrastus, who had for their devices the one that earth-born giant Typhon, half man, half snake, with flames issuing from his mouth; the other in bitter mockery of Thebes, her ancient plague, the monstrous Sphinx, with the body of a youth in its claws. The shield of Polynices bore the figure of a man in golden armor, led by a woman of noble and modest aspect, above whose head was written her name, Justice, while from her mouth came the words, "This man will I lead home." Then came King Adrastus, having from emblem a warrior fully armed, mounting a ladder against a city wall with this inscription, "Not Ares, the war god, shall turn me back." Last of all came Amphiaraus, and he only had nothing painted on his shield. He heeded not the farewells and blessings of the crowd about the city gate, but gazed before him as though in a trance, until, as he passed through the archway, he turned and looked back at the white porch of his home. There, between his 2 young sons, Eurydice was standing, and their eyes met in one long last look. Never a word had they spoken to one another since she had said the word that sent him forth to his fate, and she had shunned the sight of his calm, sad face. She could not read the meaning of the glance he now turned upon her, but it seemed to pierce her very heart. Almost she rushed forward to call him back, but in a moment he had passed on at the head of his men. "It is too late," she said aloud. and went sobbing to her chamber. But before night she had clasped on the necklace. She need not hide it now, and that was something. Adrastus and his host marched northwards through the land, and when they came to the border, they halted to offer sacrifice and prayer to Zeus, that he might send them a sign of good fortune ere they set foot on foreign ground. Amphiaraus, whose part it was as seer to interpret the signs given by the sacrifice, watched in silence while they heaped dry wood upon a wayside altar, and laid the burnt offering of a ram thereon, and kindled the pile. Well he knew that the sign given would be one plain enough for all to read without help of his. The thin flames, pale in the sunlight, had scarcely flickered up from the altar, when from the cloudless summer sky a shower of hail came hissing down upon the sacrifice, and quenched it in an instant. Thunder in one sharp peal followed the hail, which fell only on the altar. While all stood dismayed, Adrastus boldly cried, "Courage, my comrades! What though this portent tells us Zeus will not accept our offering? It may be that he foretells a greater. We have offered a ram on this poor altar, but the god perhaps signifies that he awaits the sacrifice of 100 oxen, which I have vowed him from the spoil of Thebes." Thus he cheered the spirits of his army, but the princes cried, "Let the seer interpret for us. Tell us, Amphiaraus, what bodes this sign, evil or good?" "Nay," answered the seer, "hearken rather to Adrastus, for the time is gone by when word of mine could avail you. Yet if he trusts in vows, let him know this: to obey is better than sacrifice." That night the host encamped among the hills, and next noontide they rested in a deep and grassy vale, shut in by hanging woods. The streams of the valley were now dwindled or dried up by the heat of summer, and it was needful to seek elsewhere for water. The 7 champions went a little further through the solitary vale, and found a woman seated on a flowery knoll, with a child playing at her feet, and they asked her if there were any springs in that place where their host might drink and water the horses. "I will show you," she said, "where there is such a spring. It is in yonder wood across the valley." Then they called to them their slaves from the camp, who came bearing great jars slung on poles, and followed the woman, but the child was left at play among the flowers of the meadow. Now, when they returned from the spring, he was not where she had left him, nor did he answer her calling, and she began to weep, saying, "He is the king's only son, whom I, his nurse, brought hither to play. If evil has befallen him, I am undone." "He cannot be far away," said the 7 champions, and they bade their men search the valley. But Amphiaraus saw the head and back of a serpent glancing through the meadow grass at a distance, and said, "He is yonder." They ran where he pointed, and the woman with a loud cry threw herself upon the body of the child, who lay there dead, slain by that serpent's bite. Fear and trembling came upon the 7, for all knew that the sight of death upon the road foretells utter disaster to the traveler, and of all evil signs this is the worst. Nevertheless, the hearts of the rest were hardened by the will of the gods, that they might fulfill their doom, and the seer spoke no word to turn them from their onward march, knowing it was now too late. He bade the weeping nurse be comforted, for no harm should come to her, and asked her the name of that place. "It is called the Vale of Nemea," she said, "and the folk say Heracles, that great hero, did his first mighty deed here, ridding these woods of a man-slaying lion. They say he strangled the monster with his bare hands, and I may well believe it. The men of today are but weaklings to him and his godlike generation, whom I saw in my youth. Now this woman was old and meanly clad, yet she bore herself nobly, and her speech was not the speech of a slave. Adrastus asked her name, and whether she were any kin to her master, the king of that country. I am Hypsipyle, she answered, who once was queen of an island far away. An evil fate cast me from my throne, and my foes sold me into bondage. And now, when I take the tidings to my master that his child is dead, he will surely put me to death because I kept not guard over my nursling. But the 7 champions sent a herald with those tidings to the king, her master, and he came to them with his queen and all their household, making great lamentation. The 7 gave him sorrowful greeting, and when they had made themselves known to him, they laid all blame to themselves for the mischance that had befallen, and took his promise to hold the nurse guiltless. Then they buried the child in that same meadow, and raised a lofty mound over the grave, and set a pillar of stone upon the mound, whereon his name should be engraven, to keep him in remembrance. All the host from Argos mourned for him with his own people for 3 days and 3 nights, and the king, his father, made a great funeral feast in the vale of Nemea. On the 3rd day the 7 champions departed, but first Amphiaraus made solemn offerings at the grave, pouring milk mingled with honey upon it, as the custom was, and he spoke these words to the father: I bid you engrave a new name upon this memorial stone, and not the name which your child bore in his life. Henceforth his name is Archimerus, that is, Doom's firstling. For he was made the beginning of calamity to us in this our ill-starred journey. Grieve not, O king, for his early death, since without having known toil or pain, he has won glory such as many strive for through long and weary lives. For 1,000 years to come, men shall hold solemn feasts beside his grave, and call his death to remembrance. The flower of youth from all the cities of Greece shall gather to those festivals, and contend in feats of strength, and in honor to his memory the victors shall be crowned with garlands of the wild parsley, which grows on the spot where he died. With this prophecy the seer went his way. News of the coming of the 7 champions flew before them, and there was tumult and fear in the city of Thebes. Eteocles the king made ready to defend the walls against them, and he alone felt no fear. He was of sterner mood than his brother Polynices, and the thought of their father's curse troubled him not at all. He appointed 6 doughty chieftains to guard 6 gates of the city, for his scouts brought word that each leader of the army's host was encamped before one of the 7 gates of Thebes. And having asked where Polynices was posted, he said, That gate I will defend myself. My traitor brother, who dares to threaten his mother's city with fire and sword, must fall by no hand but mine. These dreadful words were spoken in the hearing of his household, and of the wives and mothers of the citizens who had flocked for safety to the fortified rock whereon the palace stood, and all who heard them trembled. But none dared say their mind to the king, except one grey-haired dame, who had known him from a child. The gods forbid, she cried, wringing her withered hands, that ever the sons of one mother should meet in deadly fray. Nay, my king, do not this wickedness. Bring not the deep pollution of a brother's blood upon you. Command one of your captains to guard the 7th gate, and fight yourself against some other champion, not with Polynices, lest the gods of our city withhold their aid from you in anger. Then Others of the women entreated him also not to fight at the seventh gate, falling at his feet with loud laments and clasping his knees in supplication. But Eteocles thrust them away in a rage, bidding them hold their peace for a pack of brawling fools. As for the gods, he said, I care not how I may offend them, seeing that they have long hated all my race with a great hatred. And he went forth to look to the manning of the walls, and took his post at the seventh gate. The host of the 7 champions was now mustered for the onset. Their trumpets rang out the signal, and above the clash of armour and clatter of chariot wheels were heard the war cries of the 7 as they rushed forward to the assault, and the answering shouts of the men of Thebes. As the bold Tydeus mounted his chariot, he saw Amphiaraus come forth from his tent and stand beside his own ready car, stroking the necks of the horses and talking to them. "Ah, laggard," he called to him, "so our Sear is too wise to face the doom he foretold us. Now, shame on you, Amphiaraus, for even if your prophet's eyes see Death himself waiting at yonder gate, you play a coward's part in loitering here." The seer lifted up his eyes and looked towards the gate on which his men were already advancing. "I do indeed see what none else may see yonder," he answered, "but it is not Death. It is a warrior form in the likeness of myself as I was in youth, and his shield bears the speckled snake that I took for badge in memory of Melampus. Yet it is not the wraith of myself, for I see him enter that gate a victor, from which I must be beaten back this very day. It is the vision of my son, the boy of Simeon, as he will one day be seen. The gods have granted me to know, in this last hour, that our children, Tydeus, shall conquer where their fathers fell. But now farewell, brave prince, for neither you nor I shall return to pleasant Argos. Would with all my heart that I might die the death of a warrior with my noble comrades, but another doom is mine." Then, with rapt gaze still bent upon the city gate, Amphiaraus stepped into his chariot and gathered up the reins, and at the bidding of his loved voice the horses dashed full gallop into the thick of the battle. All day, like the thunder of surf against the cliffs, the din of that great fight swelled and sank round the walls of Thebes. All day a pall of coppery haze hung low over the city in the hot June air, laden with the sandy dust that rose in clouds from the trampled earth. So low it hung that the men upon the wall saw, as through veils of fog, the sudden glint of weapons and white grim faces of the foes come surging up from below, when now and again some party of the invaders had planted their scaling ladders against the ramparts in spite of the showers of darts and stones hurled down upon them. Now of scores who scaled the ladders, all were beaten back or cast down headlong before they could set foot upon the wall, except Capaneus, he of the 7 who had written on his shield the boast that he would fire the city. But he, carrying a blazing torch in his left hand, thrust it in the face of the nearest foes as he leaped among them, so that they fell back, and he sprang past them and gained the roof of a temple that was built against the wall's inner side. "Zeus himself," he shouted, "shall not stop me now." The men of Thebes durst not leave the battlement to follow him, for his comrades came crowding up the ladder, and Capaneus in another instant would have fired the wooden gable of the temple, when, with one blinding flash of jagged flame, a thunderbolt out of heaven struck him and his torch to a heap of ashes. Such was the end of a man who had ever made a boast of defying the power of gods. Now, where all fought fearlessly and well, none did more valiantly than King Adrastus, And the foemen went down like corn before the reaper as he hewed his way among them to the gate. But as the day wore on, his own ranks were thinned ever faster by the missiles from the walls, and evil reports came by one messenger after another of the fighting at the other gates. Capaneus, they said, was charred to ashes by a thunderbolt, a manifest judgment of Zeus upon his impious vaunt, and Tydeus was breathing his last, wounded to death by the Theban chieftain he had slain in single combat. Then came word that others of the seven were fallen, and when the light of sunset began to dye those reddened walls with a deeper crimson, a cry went through the host, from gate to gate. O men of Argos, our cause is lost. The princes of Thebes have met, and Polynices is hewn down by his brother's sword. At that cry, the besieged, as one man, burst out by all the gates with shouts of victory, and drove the now wavering mass of the invaders in rout before them. Adrastus knew that he only was left alive of the seven, unless Amphiaraus, of whom no word had reached him, were among the flying. The day was lost indeed, and he turned rein and fled for his life. The pursuers pressed hard upon him, and one of his horses began to slacken speed at last for weariness and lack of provender, but the other, a bay stallion of Corinthian breed that Amphiaraus had given him, held on gallantly, straining at the yoke. "Save me now, Arion," Adrastus called to him. "Save me for his sake who reared you and gave you to me." And quick as thought he lighted down from the chariot, cut Arion's trace, and sprang upon his back. The good horse neighed as if to show he understood, then went forward like the wind. Over hill and dale he sped untiring till he brought his rider safe to Argos. The king was the first to bring those evil tidings to the city, and few there were who came behind him of all the great array that went forth to Thebes. Amphiaraus was not among the fugitives, nor could any of them give news as to his fate in the battle. The city was filled with the lamentations of the old men, the women, and children, mourning for sons, husbands, and fathers, for every household was made desolate, from the least to the greatest. Then the elders of the folk, clad in white robes, for white was the hue of mourning at Argos, came to the king and besought him to send a herald to Thebes, praying leave to bring home the bones of the men who had fallen, that at least they might rest in the sepulchres of their fathers. This Adrastus did, and he himself, with the remnant of his fighting men, followed the herald to the border of the Theban land, there to wait till leave were granted. The herald returned with word that there was a new king in Thebes. Eteocles, he said, even as he clothed the helm of his brother, was stabbed by him a hand deep in the breast, and they fell down dead together. Creon, their mother's brother, now rules the city, and he grants you the truce you desire, but bids you come unarmed. So Adrastus and his train came weaponless in the white garb of mourning beneath the walls, and they built a great pyre before each gate, and laid their dead thereon for the burning. For so was the custom of those days, to burn the bodies of those slain in war abroad, and gather their ashes into urns which were laid in tombs in their own land. Now the body of Amphiaraus was not found among the slain, and as Adrastus stood watching the burning pyres, he lifted up his voice and wept, saying, "Would that even in death I might look on his face again, the jewel of all my host, the best of warriors and the best of seers." Scarcely had he said this, when he saw a youth running towards him from a grove of poplars nigh at hand, and he knew him for the shield-bearer of Amphiaraus. "How comes it, young man," said Adrastus, "that you are here neither slain nor captive, and where is your lord?" "King," said the youth, making obeisance, "these 3 days I have hidden in the woods, fearing the Theban horsemen who have been hunting our people that escaped. I was in the chariot with my lord, the Sear, while he fought, and he fought like a lion until that terror from the gods fell upon the host, when they heard that Polynices was killed. Then, when all were flying, the Seer said, 'The hour is come,' and he turned his horses from the gate. Yet he followed not the rest who fled toward Argos, but made for the woods eastward. The captain of that gate saw him and came after us, driving furiously and crying, 'Turn, coward, and fight with me.' But the Seer answered never a word, nor looked back. I feared when I looked at him, for his face was set like a statue's, and his eyes seemed following some unseen thing along the road. Now we came to an open glade among the trees, and suddenly he pulled the horses backwards and brought the chariot to a standstill and said to me, 'Light down quickly, my son, for here is my journey's end.' And as I did so, wondering, he cried, 'Stand back from the chariot, stand back from this place, I charge you, as you love your life. Command me to Adrastus, and farewell.' In that instant I felt the ground rock under my feet, and I leaped back and ran to the edge of the wood. I saw the chariot that pursued us sway from side to side, and the horses stop at mid-career, trembling and plunging, and the brandished spear drop from the Theban captain's hand. And then, oh, what a sight was that for mortal eyes! The heaving earth yawned asunder beneath the chariot of Amphiaraus, and he and his horses went down alive into the pit. Before we that saw it could draw breath to cry out, the chasm closed over their heads. Woe is me for my kind lord, and woe will there be in Argos for the shepherd of the folk that is taken away by so dread a doom. The king and all his company heard this tale in awe-struck silence, but presently they fell to weeping afresh at the thought that they could not bring back to Argos even the poor relics of that wise and mighty prince to rest in honor among his own people. The pyres of the dead burned all night, and at dawn they quenched the embers with wine, and gathered the ashes into the urns of painted clay, and made ready to depart. Then came to them out of the city a venerable old man, wearing a priest's chaplet of white wool twined with leaves on his long grey hair, and led by a young boy, for he was blind. He walked slowly to where the king was standing, and spoke thus, leaning on his staff. "My name, O King Adrastus, is Tiresias, priest of Apollo's temple in this place, to whom the gods had given the power of a seer and a diviner of dreams, even as they gave it to Melampus and his house. I am come to bid you be comforted concerning Amphiaraus, for the doom that overtook him was sent of Zeus, who would not suffer so good a man to be dishonored by falling in the rout of a vanquished host. He has perished, as the fates ordained, all save one of the 7 champions should perish, but he was spared the stroke of a conqueror's spear. Moreover, his spirit rests in peace in the abode of just and holy men departed, where the beloved of the gods are granted a tearless life forevermore. There, among the lilies and asphodel of dewy meadows, he walks beside the still waters in the light and fragrance of an eternal spring. And I am given to know that as in life he was the wise counselor of his people, so from that other world he will yet bless them with his guidance. And not them only, but folk of many lands who seek it in their need. For in days to come men will raise a temple over that spot where the earth engulfed him, and to those who sleep within its walls the dead seer will show in dreams of the night the things that they pray to have revealed. Then Tiresias returned into the city of Thebes, but Adrastus went home to Argos with the relics of the slain, pondering deeply the words that he had heard, and he lived to know that they were truly spoken. End of chapter 8.